This is The Business Chat. And welcome to The Business Chat. I'm your host, Drew Moore. They haven't kicked me out yet. I'm still hosting The Business Chat. I'm here with Gabrielle Bosché from Dallas, Texas. Gabrielle, how you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, Drew. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for taking the time and being on the show. It's good to see you again. So,
super stoked to be here.
Yeah, right on. Well, you know, like we were talking before we hit record on this chat, and when we had met last time and kind of getting to know one another, first thing we start off here, the business chat and a little shtick, our kind of graphic bit kind of shows, you know, the beer or the coffee. So without further ado, Gabrielle, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking. This is the first time I've drank it, and I've got to just be perfectly honest. I'm a huge fan. So
that's great.
It's a cashew milk latte, which makes me feel real millennial, from Clean Juice. So I think it's a franchise. I don't know where they're based out of, but there's one here on my street in downtown Dallas, which I ran out and got as soon as I forgot that I needed to go out and get it. But I'm endorsing it. It tastes delicious.
That's great. Great. Yeah. Well, we'll put up all the shout out and their URL and their branding for everybody to check out. That's watching on the video episode here and listening online. Please drive safely and do no such thing and search anything up. Thanks. That's great. So I also brought coffee today. You know, last few episodes, it's been a beer variety, a beer kick, and thought we'd change it up because, you know, we're just bringing something to drink to have this chat. I'm drinking, again, I'm always trying to show stuff that's local here to the area I'm in, but I've got the Claremont's own Sanctuary Coffee. This is their Brazil roast, and I've got my fancy little branded business chat mug that will be shipping to you, Gabrielle. We were a little behind on those, so we're just gonna send you.
I really like your mug, so I'm glad I get one.
Great, absolutely. We're kind of getting all that stuff going, and gonna have those maybe for future episodes. And you know, when we have you back, you'll have it in hand maybe next time. So everything is one step at a time. Well, great. We've got our drink, got our intro. So, Gabrielle, you do a lot of things. And when we had met and I had found your profile, as it were, on LinkedIn, like I do, and like my producer and I are scouring through these stories, yours stuck out because you're just doing lots of things. If I can just be totally candid, we were going, yeah, this lady and her husband, right, this team and the content that's out there got our attention. And so even before we started, you know, kicking off this very chat right now, I'm working through your story, your career flip. And it's best that you maybe put it, but, you know, again, we agree, you kind of come from the government work, the 9 to 5, the kind of in a box, right? And as a millennial yourself, you've now arrived at this place where you are consulting folks that would be hiring you back then, right? You're basically saying, here's what I missed. Here's what the corporate world's missing when they're recruiting millennials. And you become the strategist. So let's just jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about kind of the high level of the mission, the statement, and the work you do today, and kind of, you know, bring us up to date how you got where you are today.
Yeah, great. I love that question. And my story really started when I was 17. I was always really interested in generations. I was the one always talking about, you know, why don't people my age have friends that are older? My parents had me at an older age. They had me at 42. And so because of that, I had kind of, I think, a different relationship with adults where I saw them as friends and sometimes peers, where some of my own colleagues at my age didn't necessarily have that relationship. Right. And so what I was able to do is take that curiosity and turn it into a career. When everyone really started to look at, okay, what's wrong with this next generation? Instead of complaining, I said, well, I don't know. I actually want an answer to that. What is wrong with this next generation?
Sure.
And so I started writing because that was really all I knew how to do. So at 17, I wrote my first book about how leaders can engage with the next generation. And it started me on this really interesting path of asking questions and seeking answers to things that most people thought were unanswerable.
Right.
And so when I help people, when I coach people about what it is that they want to do next, one of my first questions is, what have you overcome that you can help someone else overcome? What have you overcome that you can help others overcome? And for me, I had to overcome what it was like to be the youngest person in my class, to be the youngest person at my company, to be the youngest person, even going into my university. I was 17 years old in college. And so I had to learn how to articulate myself in a way that was relatable, reasonable, relevant, but also too authentic to me. And so kind of in your intro of even this question, I think is really profound in how you put it, in that I had to become for others what I wanted someone to be for me. which was a
Bingo.
translator.
Yeah.
I wanted to become a translator between generations because I saw that there was a giant need. And I started off my career in government, mostly because my parents are entrepreneurs and I'm not rebellious, but the only rebellious thing I think I did was doing the opposite of entrepreneurship, which was get a government job. And as I was working in the government, I realized that I was more of the problem than the solution. And so I kind of went on this purpose discovery path of working for nonprofits, trying to do stuff on my own, trying to freelance, and finally getting to a place where recognizing my purpose is generational reconciliation, bringing people together who don't quite see the world the same way. And what I teach, and I've worked with every major brand from Audi, Volkswagen, Expedia, Walmart. We work with the Air Force. We've spoken to the CIA. We've worked with so many organizations at really high levels with this mindset around how do we become more curious than critical about another generation. And I think that conversation goes both ways. As a millennial myself, I'm 32 years old. I've been doing this. I started my company at 23, but I've been doing this for a lot longer than that, where I just started to look at, okay, where are the holes where we're not quite, where we don't have solutions to yet, whether it's generational leadership style or communication, expectations, decision making.
Right.
And how do we take research and brain science and come up with solutions that are going to work for you, whether you have 5 people on your team or 5,000?
Wow, what a tremendous answer. Yeah, that's great. I like so many statements you had in there that were good, that were gold. And it's empathy for the generation, right? It's you're displaying empathy and an empathetic attitude toward the HR culture and toward corporate as well, because you understand their struggle uniquely, that there's a broad brush being applied where there needs to be a bit more of a focus, and there needs to be a stepping back and refocusing with every generation, every so often, going, how is this new group of humans up and coming out of high school different, and what are the factors that we need to do better on the hiring side when we're looking at not just staffing a company but new leaders. And that's kind of the focus of what I hear you kind of saying in your content on LinkedIn is we're missing that there's leaders, we're missing that there's entrepreneurs by several things, and whether that's a default to higher ed or a way that we recruit. Definitely I hear you saying that we're a different breed. There's a lot about us that's still regular human beings, and there's a lot of things I think we're doing well, in our hiring culture in general. Just seeing us go back to kind of authenticity is kind of the thing now, right? But yeah, how cool that you have a laser focus on millennials. So enough from Drew. Tell me, okay, so we've got the millennialsolution.com, right? The Millennial Solution. I see Brian and Gab at brianandgab.com, and I see the Purpose Company. For those listening, few watching, that are kind of already starting to check out your content and what help them understand these brands and where I can see there's the Millennial Solution and what that is. But explain kind of what Gabrielle's got, all these irons in the fire, what's going on with your day-to-day with these brands, these companies.
Yeah, it is really interesting because sometimes when I work with folks who want to start something, they want to do it all at once. Mm-hmm. They want to write a book, start a podcast, start a company, become an astronaut, train
Sure.
dogs, whatever they want to do,
right,
all at the same time. And if you try and do too many things and you have a divided focus, you never get anywhere. Mm. And so at a really young age, I knew that professionally I wanted to write and I wanted to speak. I knew that from the time I was 14. I didn't know I could get paid for that, but I knew that I was just naturally a communicator.
Right.
And so finding a career that someone would let me write and speak for a living was a little challenging. And so the first company I started was the Millennial Solution.
Okay.
And I started that company at a networking event where someone asked me what I did. And at the time I'd written my second book, 5 Millennial Myths, and I'd never spoken on it. I'd never done anything with it. It was just a passion project, frankly. And at the time I was a fundraiser for a nonprofit. I was a terrible fundraiser. I was the kind of person that said, if you want to give, you can. If you don't want to, not a big deal. Like I was just the most apathetic
That didn't work out
ever.
too well. Yeah.
I was not successful. And I remember this woman asked me what I did, which is a normal question to ask
Sure.
in a networking meeting. And I said something really interesting. I said who I was. I didn't say what I did. I said, I'm an expert in millennials. And she looked at me, and at that moment, I thought, this woman's totally going to not believe me. I had all the imposter syndrome vibes you can think of. But what's interesting is she looked at me and she said, oh my gosh, we could really use you. And I said, okay, well, where do you work? She said, the Navy. It's like, oh, of the United States? She said, yes, of the United
Federal
States.
government, yeah.
And the Navy was my first ever client, and I've had the opportunity to be on over 9 different naval bases, had the opportunity to work with the Air Force, and it's been a really powerful journey. But I took this moment to say who I was, not what I did, and not be defined by a job title. Now, why was I an expert? It wasn't because I just said that I was. I was an expert. There's 2 different types of experts. There's experience-based experts, which is, I've hiked Kilimanjaro 12 times. I can show you the way. I know the best practices. Come follow me. And there are empirical experts, which is, I haven't done it myself, but I've interviewed everybody who's done it. I've done all the research. I know the landscape, and here's what you need to know. The best experts are both. But if you can't get the experience, if you're not, 60, you haven't done it for 25 years, you don't have a PhD, become that empirical expert, which is what I did by writing a book. And so I started my career really by becoming an expert in something I had experience in, being young myself, but doing the research and the work and saying, what are best practices to engage the next generation? So I started this company, and it grew really quickly. Like I said, I worked with every major brand you can kind of think of when it comes to engaging the next generation and studying millennial motivation. Through this whole journey, I ended up meeting my husband, Brian, getting married, starting to do some work together. And through that, we had this moment where we were working with some major brands on employee retention. Okay. And it became very clear that whether we were talking to millennials or not, everybody wanted to know purpose. Whether you were 22 or 62, people were like, I just want to know, number one, that I matter, and number two, that what I do matters. And so we had this moment where we kind of looked at each other and we said, you know what, there's something really profound here. And so we started going down this avenue of teaching on purpose and how do you find purpose at work and connect it to the mission of the company. And in fact, that became more popular even than our generational leadership training. So that's where kind of this Brian and Gab brand came about, where my husband and I started to do trainings together. And by the way, we've been speaking together since the day we got married. Literally, our wedding was like dueling pianos between the 2 of us with 2 different microphones. Like, we do not stop talking. And so we had launched this brand and started to do some work together. And through it, we actually launched a whole new company called the Purpose Company, solely focused on helping individuals find their purpose, their exact purpose, and apply it to what they want to do next. So it's been an incredible journey. So we've still got the Millennial Solution. I still work with major brands on generational leadership. It's amazing. That hasn't gone away. But we've actually had this whole new chapter of my husband and I now working on how do we work with individuals who are high achievers, who feel stuck, unfulfilled, or scratching their head saying, maybe for the first time in my life, I don't know what's next for me. How do we help them answer that and then turn it into something that's powerful, and so that they're not just making a living, but they're making a difference as well?
Again, tremendous answers. And you obviously speak well and speak a lot and know exactly what you do. And that's great. And I think one of the things that stood out, what you just said, and maybe you can repeat it again, you said you and your husband found that the more important thing, or the more prominent thing you began doing, was what again? I loved what you said there. I just don't want to botch it. It was great.
That it was more popular for us to help people find their purpose than even talk about generational differences. Because in my purpose being generational reconciliation, I care more about bringing people together than dividing us.
Right.
Because we have far more in common than we have anything that really differentiates us. And so if you as a leader, whether you've got a small team or an international team, can help your people first find their purpose and secondarily connect it to their work, you don't have communication issues. You don't have retention issues. You don't have frustration in the workplace like so many organizations are having right now. Right. And so it really started out this most basic foundational level of every single person on the planet is asking this purpose question. Can we help them connect to their purpose quickly and help them see how their purpose is making a difference in the company and beyond?
Yeah, and we see a rise in coaching today, right? I think 3/4 of LinkedIn's a conversation about some of these things, and it's great to hear on your journey professionally, and for our audience listening, who's primarily listening again to Gabrielle's Flip Your Career Change, again from government, moving out into your own entrepreneurial path, and the stage I hear is, hey, here's the millennial focus initially. Millennial Solution was you kind of coming up on the stage and going, here's something I can offer. Here's something I'm understanding. And it's evolved into the Purpose Company and they sort of feed into each other, it sounds like, right? The way you just described it is you're going and going, hey, here's what you're missing, folks, with millennials, and let me help you guys retain that talent and understand them. And it sounds like some more way you can help individuals and teams, but like you said, individuals is first, let's take a step back from the question of how come you're on this stumbling block of millennials? You don't understand them or missing them. They're not applying for your company. You're not even able to attract that talent. It's first about, and maybe this is where I want to dive in a little, is that kind of something you're seeing that you guys have deep dives with executives, for example, and you understand, hey, once they do understand their purpose, perhaps that helps them come back to the question of millennials. Would you say kind of that's what you're seeing?
100%.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think that the role that companies, and you've probably seen this too with your client work, the role of companies are changing. It's no longer transactional. You work for me, you do, and then I give you a paycheck and a couple weeks off a year.
Right.
It's really moved from transactional to transformational, where you come and you work for me, you make this place a better place to work, but I make you a better person as well. There's a partnership there. And I think millennials have helped lead the charge in that regard, and that this is a generation who has an expectation that what we do makes a difference. We want to have a global impact. We want to make a difference in the justice field. We want to connect with people and be vulnerable. We have higher expectations and higher requirements of those who employ us. But at the same time, we also too see employers who are starting to recognize the market forces that consumers care about, the triple bottom line. They know that for every cup of coffee or pair of shoes that they buy, that every time we buy something, it's not just me consuming something, it's me supporting a brand. And especially as millennials who know that every time we buy something and take a snapshot of it, we're world-class brand ambassadors. And so we're not going to buy something or endorse something that we don't truly believe in. So I think that the emergence of this purpose economy is really interesting, that I think people are using the word purpose not just as a platitude, but as a standard by which they're really measuring everything against.
Yeah, the last guest we had on the show was a tremendous example of what you're talking about, where she didn't necessarily call out something that she found just, at least my understanding, wildly unethical about her time, and she wouldn't mind me mentioning at Starbucks at the time, corporate, in their company. It was more that she just couldn't get excited about it. She couldn't get behind some of the strategy, I think more or less some of the ethos and their purpose. And I wonder how much that's really in the mind of most of today's millennials. And as a guy further along in my 30s, I remember toward the end of the time, it's traditional job actually working, that's something you had to push to the back of your brain. You had to go, well, I don't love this, but it just pays the bills. Yeah. And to some degree, that's passed down generationally. There's some good work ethic even maybe built in that mindset of just, who likes finishing out that last senioritis year in college and that kind of thing. But, you enter the workforce and you're told that you are there to now, put your skills out there and allow a company to grow you a little bit too. And from the get-go, I can see that we've flooded the marketplace with a group of humans we don't understand could be brand ambassadors. And so if that's not part of understanding their onboarding and sifting who's best in what role, you're missing that. And I think this is my point to those listening on the C-suite side. You've got people probably in your internship programs, maybe further down, maybe they're full-time employees, that aren't just probably going to perform better understanding them. They may want to shout from the rooftops about what you do, but they've got to get behind it. And you have to understand, like you said, that in kind of a simple metaphor, but it's true, we want to Instagram what we're drinking, eating, doing, let alone what we do 40 hours a week. So, yeah. And that buy-in isn't just something that we're going to take. That buy-in, we need permission and an invitation to. Sure.
And so as a leader, you have a huge opportunity to invite someone in. And I get it. It's messy. It's messy working with young people. It's not perfect. It's not, it's not really clear cut. They may mess up. They may embarrass you. They may, cost you money. Being aware that it is far more expensive to keep a millennial or a Gen Z employee stuck and uninspired, because you're going to have to replace them, than it is for them to mess up and do something that maybe hurts your short-term bottom line. And I think a lot of times as leaders, we don't think about that. When I ask executives, how much does it cost you for you to lose an employee? Maybe 10% of executives I talk to actually know that number. We don't think about that, but they know how much their marketing is. They know their legal budget. They know how much they're spending on social media ads, but they don't think about their employees as a line item that they need to retain. And so it's just looking at how do we relate to the people who are working for us, whether they're millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, it doesn't really matter. It's so much about leadership is curiosity. We talk about generational empathy when we do training. How do you be empathetic and curious about someone who sees the world differently than you?
Yeah.
And just starting off with that as a basis, I think opens up some really beautiful and powerful conversations. Whereas before, it's so easy for us to write off people we don't understand. But that's the easy way out and leads to really short returns. But if you want to do something that really makes a difference, that really moves the needle and actually changes the world, then you've got to open it up and be willing to have those conversations.
Yeah, and what you're saying in there too as a piece of the inference is the millennials are here. Like you're gonna have to deal with them. You don't get to change and affect that culture so much as you get to, at least in the corporate world, right? There's other places in culture where we talk about affecting and positively charging up the culture and awareness and those kind of things. But in the corporate world and the workplace and workforce conversation, it's more of a, hey, you need to deal with this tidal wave coming. And it's kind of here. You're swimming in it, right? And they're millennials. And I like your tone is that it's not here's how you get them to understand how you do things. It's here's how you understand who it is you're talking to and why engagement's changed and all those other nuances to what folks are fill in the blank on what your, pain point is, folks listening on millennials. And it's more about having the attitude that, hey, like you said, understand where they're coming from and be curious. That's great. Going back to your story a little bit in the kind of remaining time we have, because we obviously have to have you back and do a millennial series and deep dive and, get Gabrielle to really give some case studies and talk about trends you're seeing. But in your story as a millennial yourself, and again, in this conversation we're having about your transition out of government work, out of moving through the motions, and now you're here talking with me. Talk about some things that you found surprisingly, after you leave government work, right, and you're working in this millennial consulting. What were some things that you found was, wow, this is a lot harder? More of those, no one really gave me the memo and told me this was going to be this way. Was it writing the book, the first book? Was it public speaking? What were the things? Give me those juxtaposing. What was super easy for Gabrielle, and what was a bit of a challenge as a new entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship. I actually wrote a whole book called The Millennial Entrepreneur as I was starting my business because I'm just kind of naturally curious. And when I'm going through something, I'm always looking around like, are you experiencing this? Is it just me? So I kind of selfishly wrote a book about it and kind of studying how the next generation is starting and leading businesses differently. Right. And as a young entrepreneur and a child of entrepreneurs, like my parents own businesses, which made me not want to do that at all. And so some of the early challenges were me really trying to figure myself out. Because if you're going to start a business, you're going to learn more about yourself than you are about running a business, plain and simple. You have got to be more curious about yourself to say, well, why didn't I show up that way? Or why did I shrink back? Or why did I say that? Or why did I react that way? Interesting. And in real time, you've got to auto correct because it could cost you big. And not just financially, it could cost you in opportunities. My biggest regrets have been missed mentorship opportunities where I didn't go all in when I met someone. And I still do this. I reach out to people who inspire me and I say, hey, I'd love to buy you a virtual coffee, or I'd love to go out to lunch with you. Sure. Your story inspires me. And I've had the most amazing connections and most amazing opportunities because I was willing to honor the legacy that someone has left and just open up a conversation with them and learn from them. So I've always seen my youth as an asset. But the biggest mistakes I certainly made was thinking that, okay, because I'm really good in one area, then I can figure things out in others. And so rather than looking at my ability to figure it out, which has always been an asset for me, to then overload myself and say, well, I can figure it out in all these other realms. So I think that was certainly the most challenging. And then, learning more about myself and really being not critical, because if you are self-critical, it can become a prison. You won't move forward. You won't make a decision. You won't feel confident in the decision that you've made. So it's not necessarily criticism as much it is studying yourself. I call it lab mentality.
Right.
Are you going into a new situation, a new opportunity, and studying yourself like you would an experiment, using a scientific method to say what's working, what's not, what needs to be changed, what's the control variable here, and really wanting to improve your output. So that's something I had to learn really early on, especially in expertise-based business where I'm speaking, I'm consulting, it's based off of me. It's not a product I can tweak, it's me. You learn to not take anything personally. I mean, even just as simple as a speaker, I'm a female, I'm 5'9". I can't wear a dress on stage because people will comment about it. They'll say things good, bad, and different.
Sure.
I could leave a stage and say, well, that's not fair. I should be able to wear whatever I want, but that's not my job. I'm not a model. The clothes aren't my end result.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is an end result. And so I wear all black all the time. I pretty much wear the same thing. I have 3 different versions of it.
Sure.
Because I don't want anything I do to be distracting to what it is that I'm saying.
Nice.
So it's a simple thing that as business owners, sometimes we think, well, I should be able to do it my way. But you don't run your business for you. You run it for other people.
So hold on. That's amazing. If you didn't catch that, and again, to the audience that's listening, that's craving insight from where Gabrielle Bosché sits today, say it again slowly, because that's all, and that's it. You're right. That's you giving the wisdom piece here. Is say it one more time. I love what you just said.
That you don't run your business for yourself. You run it for other people.
That's it. Service or product, right? I mean, you're looking at if you signed up for this thing called business and being an entrepreneur and starting and entering the market, you leave a lot of things at the door that have no place in that mindset, in that life. It doesn't mean you lose your, as I heard you say, your personality. And it also doesn't mean that you're so critical to yourself that it's this kind of ill-advised, masochistic kind of thing where you're like, and it causes analysis paralysis. And I saw this in myself. I know even getting this silly podcast off the ground and wanting just to get it going, surrounding myself with some of the folks you're kind of alluding to, having some coaches, having some professionals on the technical side going, man, just go, move with it, And here's ways to create benchmarks, scientific methods to get better. But I think what you just said is probably the biggest, piece of wisdom, and it's all been great, Gabrielle, but that's a piece that I would absolutely make sure is echoed to the audience, that you're running this for other people. So you're an instrument. You're one of the bigger wheels and cogs in the machine, and so you have to look at yourself that way. That's tremendous. And I hear you, by the way, putting yourself out there. In my question talk about what was hard and easy, and like you said, it's all about understanding that you need some personal refinement. And if it's only you dealing with it and you don't allow people, would you agree, into your life to call that stuff out? And so how does one do that? How did that work out for you? Did you actually enlist a coach? Did you find you and your husband had that mechanism? Talk personally a little bit about how you were able to kind of make sure you were on the right path.
Yeah, the accountability is so incredibly important.
Yeah.
So there's different tiers. You're wanting to have a mentor, so someone who knows more than you, someone who can help navigate the next thing for you, who can keep you out of the mud puddles. And that also too counts as coaches. I've invested in so many coaches throughout my time where when I was younger, I felt entitled to mentorship. I felt, well, someone should want to help me. But as you become more professionalized, you realize that you get what you pay for.
How millennial of you, by the way. How dare you? How typically millennial. I'm kidding. Yeah, that makes sense. The mindset shift. I get it. Yeah.
It changes really quickly as you think, well, someone should want to be able to help me, which may or may not be the case. If you have that mindset that someone should want to help me, you're putting your purpose in someone else's hands. Because you're saying, well, they should believe in me more than I believe in myself. And they're never going to. So find someone who's more advanced than you who can help navigate that. I talk about stalking success. Right. Find people who are further along doing what it is that you want to do, having the kind of impact you want to have, and reverse engineer how they got there. Then there's that pure accountability, your friends, your partners, people in your life who can say, well, okay, Drew, you talked about doing this. Are you actually doing it? Yeah. Right. It's like that, elbow in your side that's like, no, you need to figure it out. But there's also too something that not many people think about is who is it that you're mentoring? Because you need to think about accountability of someone else who's coming up behind you. You don't want to let them down because they're looking up to you. So if you surround yourself by this kind of trifecta of accountability, people who've gone before you, people who are on your same level, and people who you're investing in, you're going to stay on track versus if it was just you in the wild waiting for your willpower to push you through. You're never going to make it happen. You've got to protect yourself so that way you actually get to live out that purpose we're talking about.
Yeah, and in a sense, you paint that trifecta. I love the triangle, the picture, and there's definitely that concept that I've experienced, and that most anybody listening at least understands this concept of having those. I don't know if it's beneath you is the word, but to the side, right? A younger protege and someone you're pouring into as you're being poured into is really a beautiful picture, and that we should see more common in corporate culture. But it's something I hear you saying, it's back on the personal accountability, particularly for those of you listening that are entrepreneurs, which the business chat's kind of facing, is saying, no matter where you're at in business, whether you've started your own pop-up coffee and donut shop or you're leading a Fortune 500, I agree with what you said. If I'm quoting you correctly, that there's really no time in that journey where you shouldn't be mentoring another, and you should be, submitting yourself to the exercise of someone that could mentor you. And a piece of that mentorship, we could have another hour conversation on, but of course is that accountability sandwich kind of thing. I love that. Would you say today that you've got that going for you? Are you able to mentor and be mentored still today?
Yeah, and that was something that I have intentionally put in place in really the last 5 years. I think you can kind of pinpoint my trajectory of growth to those three things going on. I think a big part of it is my husband, who is very much an accountability tool, but also to friends, where I was joking around with a good friend of mine the other day. I said, I think all of my friends are either in sales or entrepreneurs. Like, I don't know at what point in my life I've attracted this kind of person that likes to be rejected, but apparently there's something in me that, and we actually talk about different origin stories in our book, The Purpose Factor, and one of them is rejection overcomer, which is what I am. And I'm like, there's something about me that's always looking for people who are okay with people saying no in front of them. I'm like, I like those people. And so the accountability of having friends and folks who are on the same level of me, on the same journey, who can commiserate, who can share big wins, all of that I think has been great. But yeah, I can absolutely pinpoint my success to when I intentionally put in those three different accountability tools to make sure that I was being on track, kept on track by coaches, mentors, people who've gone before me, my peers and my partner, and then people that I've been pouring into. Wow,
that's great. I'm really going to take that one to heart personally too. It's a great reminder for anybody, for everybody. In closing here, as we have to wrap up. I'm so sorry. We can't keep talking all day. Yeah, we're just scratching surfaces, and I'm finding this is what I need to get over this and more, and that we'll have to just we can only handle so much. Is what's next? What's next for Purpose Company? For Millennial Solution, what do you see coming down the road, just high level, while we're closing here?
Yeah, we're so stoked. So our second TED Talk comes out here shortly. So we're excited about that, which is all about your purpose is your permission, and really stems from just something I really had to learn, was that I was waiting for permission to move at a really young age. So we're really excited about that. We've got a new purpose assessment that we're developing that will be unveiling kind of in the next 6 months or so. So that's our really big project, is really distilling the 5+ years of purpose research that we've been doing into something that an individual or a company can take and use and quickly connect the individual's purpose to the mission of the company.
Cool.
So yeah, we're super, super excited about that, and just seeing the implications and applications in a really powerful way.
Well, I'll make sure we're on the mailing list over here at the Business Chat as all this exciting stuff's coming out. One thing we didn't do at the outset, because we just got right into this and it was too fun and it just kind of got away from me, is we didn't do our virtual cheers. So if you still have your lovely local coffee, I've got mine, and we'll go ahead and give the virtual cheers to cap it off. Thanks so much, Gabrielle Bosché, everybody from Dallas, Texas. Again, you can find the great work she's doing on the millennialsolution.com, thepurposecompany.co. We're going to link the books she's written, the things she's doing, her LinkedIn profile, all that to the description of this episode. Gabrielle, thanks again. It was great to hang out and chat.
Oh, same here. Thanks so much for having me on, Drew.
All right, we'll see you around. Take care.